Alright lads, a few people have asked after having finished and uploaded the Plasma Bolter modeling series. A few people have actually asked me in the comments to would I do a Keyshot render series. So I was going to move on and do another modeling series, but I thought maybe we could do a quick two-part series. I don't know, they could be, I don't know how long it's going to be, but it'll be two parts anyway. One from Zbrush here to Keyshot. We'll render out our passes in Keyshot, and then we'll do another one in Photoshop, just compositing the passes and doing a bit of a Paintover. It's a fairly popular method these days, more so now, obviously with the introduction of Zbrush to Keyshot. I've been doing it myself, I suppose, the last maybe year and a half or something like that. It's a nice workflow because you can get things out quick. You're not waiting for hours and hours of shader and lighting tests and everything in your 3D package, and then hours and hours or days even of rendering and all the rest of it. You know, you can. People had been doing it in ZBrush before, long before Keyshot came along. I think Vitaly Bulgarov was one of the first I saw over in ZBrush Central. He was doing his usual mechs and robots, amazing render passes and comping them out straight from ZBrush. But it's pretty much the same idea, but now more rendering power with Keyshot. Keyshot is a fantastic render. Um, it's really quick. It's CPU progressive render. It's a really fast render, and you can even just, if you have two monitors, you can just leave it sitting. Split the cores up and leave it sitting, running on your other monitor there, and just keep jumping back and forth from ZBrush to Keyshot, and it's a brilliant way to visualize it as you're building. So there's just a couple of things before we jump across to Keyshot that I wanted to, a few notes I suppose, or a few different options you have while we're here in ZBrush. So if anyone followed along with the Bolter series, you'll know this is the final result here. And as I mentioned in that, this is the version I saved out just with the creasing on it, and I have another version saved with Beveling on it. So this version with the creasing on it, I just wanted to show a few extra things to bear in mind. It pretty much follows on from the other video and the discussion I've kind of had about using creasing and control edges in conjunction when you're sub D modeling like this, and you'll see why now. I'll just give a quick example. So I'll just select this top part here, the side part, and solo it out, and you'll just see we have our creasing here. And so I'll just turn off dynamic subdivision. You can see here we've a creasing, but we don't really have any control edges, whereas most of the other models were built primarily with control edges and some creasing. But this was just, I built this I think just to show the creasing as well. So when we subdivide, I'm just gonna I think that has yeah, that part there. I think we left. Oh, I think we left the creasing off that part actually. So what we can do is, I'm just gonna have a quick. Yeah, I think that part. I actually remember now, but yeah, I think that part we might have left the creasing off. So another quick way to add creasing, just was what I have this in mind here, because we don't. There's no creasing on that. Is come down here to the crease rollout, sub rollout, and the geometry rollout, and then we can use this crease by angle. It's an angle tolerance, so you know, I can set that to 45. Crease that, and you'll see then that's going to crease all of our 90-degree corners. So when we press go into dynamic subdivision mode, now you can see it's creased the same as this. So that's another quick way of applying creases to geometry that's mostly 90-degree corners. So by doing it this way, if you've very kind of square geometry with 90-degree corners, you can go in and or even with curved parts on it here, you see that wasn't within the tolerance, so we get a nice smooth effect there, and keep our sharp edges here. So with all that said, I'm just gonna convert this creasing across to the beveling like we showed in the other videos. So I'm going to turn on proportional width and hit crease and turn on dynamic subdivision. And you can see now at the moment there's a very slight bevel on it. So I'll just crease again, or sorry, bevel again, and that should be dynamically updating there. So at the moment you can see how small the bevels are. Sorry, I just done Control Z a couple of times there. For some reason it wasn't. Usually this bevel width it updates kind of on the fly as you tweak it, but I'm going to put this up to maximum and bevel again, and you can see the bevel width is a lot bigger than it was. And now if I turn on dynamic subdivision, you can see areas like this where we don't have any control edges. You know, you couldn't leave that like that. It's terrible looking. So following on from the examples I gave in the video on control edges in conjunction with creases, we'll just undo that, and then you know you can just add in some control edges. So if we come over to our Zmodeler brush, and I'm just going to get the pivot centered up here and just click there. So we'll come in here, insert loop, we'll put one there, we'll put one here, and just hold shift to snap that one, and we'll do the same over here. We'll stick one in here, and we'll stick one here, and you can see now with that 45-degree tolerance I had earlier on, that's actually after creasing in here, which we don't want. So one quick way to do that is just to crease edge and just hold down Alt, and we can just uncrease those ones. So uncrease, uncrease, uncrease. And I could have played with the tolerance, but I'm just giving quick examples here, just things to bear in mind that I mightn't have mentioned while I was building this piece. So let's say we have that in place now, and we want to check our beveling again at maximum. You know, we still now we're we might want to increase this as well, and you can see the results it's given there with that maximum crease, sorry, the maximum bevel. So we'll increase edge loop complete, and I'll just increase that for us, and then we can rely on our control edges. There's a couple that we missed out on there, so I'm just going to go increase again. So holding Alt, and that should be it there now. Let's go back out, and we just might want to take this point here, so I'll just drop down my brush size, just drop that right down, and then we can just hover over a point and slide, and we'll just slide that one down just to space out that the geometry bit there, and that gets rid of that nasty kind of bunching. So I think bevel again there now. I think you get the idea. So there it is now with the bevel. It's more of a bevel on it than was on it before, and you know, you can play around with those settings and adding in edge loops and control loops and things like that, and let's turn off perspective and just play with your shapes and using the tools and techniques that we've shown in the other lengthy series of modeling videos. So yeah, that's that out of the way. So what you do then, I'm not going to do it here now, but as the model was being built, the models that had creasing on it, like this section here, the barrel, you know, you might want to come in and proportional width, and I'll just drop that down. You can see there's the dynamic beveling there now, where it's updating. So just get that as you want, as sharp or as soft as you want, and that's created a beveled geometry there for us. So walk through your subtools and put beveling on, or don't, or do whatever you like. It's up to you, whichever you prefer the look of, and that's kind of that'll get the models ready then for going into Keyshot then. And one more thing is I want to talk about is surface noise. So this whole process we're about to go through here, you have different options. You know, you could dynamesh all these and poly paint them, save out the textures and apply them to the low res versions. Then, you know, you'll have to UV, or you could use Zbrush's automatic UV tools. But that all, you know, that's more for a production kind of a workflow, where creating a production model, maybe with normal maps or whatever. It could be a game model or whichever, or a high res kind of model. But it's a bit much, like, for what we're doing here. All we're doing is a still illustration render kind of an image, so it's a bit much doing all that. So the other option you have, then you can use surface noise, and now with Zbrush 4.7 and Keyshot, before when you applied surface noise to the mesh, it was dependent on the resolution, so everything looked good in the surface noise preview window, and even when the surface noise was temporarily applied to your mesh. But then when you actually applied it to the mesh by pressing the apply button, the results would drastically change, and that was based on your resolution. So if obviously the higher and more evenly spaced out your resolution, the better the detail. The same as, I'm sure everybody's coming from a sculpting background, there's probably beginners here as well, but you know, I'm sure most of you understand how mesh resolution works, and in particular in Zbrush, or even with displacement maps. You know, you're displacing the geometry, so obviously the more dense the topology, the more detail you'll gain, you know. So with that said, I'm just going to come down and show you what, you know, the surface noise. I'm not going to use this now, but it's just another option that you have. So I'm just going to select this part here and solo it out. Maybe just change to actually we can leave on that material there. And now if I come down to surface noise and just turn on noise, you'll see the preview window, and it's the same navigation controls as the canvas. So, you know, you have 3D noise, which is procedurally applied to the model, or you also have UV noise, which is grayed out here because we don't have UVs in the mesh. So I have another video there about using the UV functions and tiling textures in Noisemaker here, so I won't go into all that. You can have a look at that if you're interested. So the 3D functions here you could use, but depending on the noise, I'll just zoom in. And also now, as I was saying earlier on, sorry, I think I digressed a bit, but Zbrush 4.7 and Keyshot now, the surface noise, rather than being, you don't have to apply it to the mesh, so you can put it onto a low res model like this as a preview, but then when you export it to Keyshot is going to recognize it as displaced and render it as displaced geometry, which is a pretty incredible feature, another incredible feature added in R7. So it's something you can take advantage of now with low poly meshes for this kind of concepty kind of illustration work. So we'll just have a quick look at the noise here. You can open up the noise plug, and you've all these different patterns here. So, you know, you could choose maybe dense, and just click OK then. And then if we come over here now, this has changed a bit in R7 as well. we now have the ability to mix from the basic noise controlled by this graph curve here with the plug-in noise, or if you're using the UVs with your tile and texture noise. So we'll just have a quick look at that now. This is the noise from this, and this is the noise from the plug-in. So if we switch to switch this all the way to 1, I can't remember which one this is now. That's the basic noise. So I'm just going to bring the strength down, so we can adjust the strength here and the scale, so they're both self-explanatory. And then if you want to, you know, you can get some different kinds of results messing around with this curve here. Just do whatever you like here, and if you want to get rid of points, you just grab them and just drag them away, and that'll go back to the default graph. So we'll bring this down the other way now to 0, and you can see our plug-in noise now is showing up, and you can do the same thing. You can adjust the strength and the scale, and then we can bring this the mix back into the center, and now we can use these. That's just a 50-50 mix, and then you can multiply one on top of the other, get the difference, min, max. So you can play around with all these settings, play around with the curve, play around with the noise plugin, and you know, once you get a result, so this obviously isn't going to be suitable for this, but I'll just leave it at that for the example. So we'll get the result, and you'll see now, before you couldn't really do much with this. You'd have to apply it to the mesh, and if I do that now, you'll see that there's, because of the low poly count, nothing has shown up, because it hasn't got the resolution to show it. So I'll just undo that. So what you would do is you just leave it at that, don't apply it, and then when you're happy with it, you can export this as is to Keyshot, and this is going to show up and be rendered as displaced geometry, which is pretty incredible. So play around with that. It's just another option. I'm not going to do it here, but it's another option you have. What I'm going to be using bump maps within Keyshot instead, so just something to bear in mind. So with those things out of the way, they were just two things I kind of wanted to get out of the way. I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of workflow here. So it's always, I know you're probably dying for me to jump into Keyshot, but these are just a few things to get out of the way first, and to sort that are quite important. Particularly, you know, I find this a good idea. And a couple of years back, I think I was Neil Blevins, he's a Pixar artist and a 3D Max user, and one of the heroes of the 3D Max community. But Neil Blevins, also known as Soulborn, he had a brilliant DVD series from Nomon a couple of years back on hard surface shading and texturing, using different methods and mixing different methods that I've kind of stuck to this day. And it was him that kind of I got the idea from, to plan this sort of stuff out, breaking materials up. Now this isn't as complex as it would be if you were creating shaders in your 3D package, because we're only creating these for renders and paintovers for an illustration, but we don't need to use V's or anything like that, so a lot of that stuff doesn't really come into play, but the basics, the fundamentals do. So you can break it down here. I'm just going to grab up, hang on a sec, it's just on my other monitor. I just want to pull across, pull this to the side as well. So even though this is stylized, kind of a cartoony kind of a reference we're going from, we're not really trying to copy real world materials or whatever. You know, by looking at this, there's not many materials, we can break it down. So with our base layer, which is going to be at the very bottom, it's going to be the very bottom layer in Photoshop, and that's just going to be like a bright kind of a shiny metal. And we're going to be using masks and scratching away layers above it, in this case the paint, to reveal that bright shiny metal underneath. So that'll be it. So we're going to be building this kind of as it might be, you know, if you stripped away the paint, you're going to have the metal underneath, so we'll build it back up the same way, kind of reverse engineering it, I suppose you could think of it like. So we've our base layer, the bright shiny metal, then we're going to need the red painted. This is red paint, obviously, metallic-y kind of red paint. So red painted worn metal, we're going to render out a layer of the red paint, and then we can just copy that layer and adjust it in Photoshop. It'll save us doing an extra render and make that more kind of worn or desaturated, as if you know, by wear and tear, where it had been you know, people's hands had mauled it, or it's faded away from the sun. So we'll have two layers of that. Then we'll pretty much have an identical setup here for this blue part, the skull and the wing. That's going to be painted metal as well. You know, you don't really know what it is from this cartoony drawing, but we're just going to, you know, take it for granted that's the same as this paint wise. Same metal underneath, same paint at the top, just a different color. So we'll do the same here. Render out a blue painted worn metal layer and do the same in Photoshop. Then we can group these and mask them together, so it gives us variation, even more variation. And that's kind of the key to texture and anything, is building it up, layering it and creating variation and subtle details and more interest for the eye, you know, rather than just one flat red color, bang, and call it done, because it's just going to look silly, you know. It'll look like a lump of Lego. So that's our red and our blue, and then we're going to have two scratch metal. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. So we're going to have, you see there's variation here. There's darker metal here, there's a more kind of a bluish, greenish kind of a metal here, and we'll just have a couple of different variations, and we can do the same then by scratching it away with masks and revealing our bright shiny underneath. So you'll almost have kind of three layers, the main layer, the variation layer, and then underneath the scratched layer, then just a scratch brass for the eagle here, and then a red wax, which is going to be a, you know, we'll use a translucent material in Keyshot. So that's basically all, you know. There's not many, it's quite a simple, straightforward shader setup for this. You know, we're only going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's all we need. So the next step, once we know what materials we need, is to break it down and what textures do we need for these materials. So I'm just going to drag this across now from the other monitor. So I've gathered up these couple of textures here. We don't need that many of them. So these will be color and bump maps. So of red metal, we have a red metal here. We'll jump into Photoshop in a minute, I can show this. Then we have our blue metal, don't mind this one here. In fact, I'm going to delete that one. So we have our blue metal here. Now these are tiling textures. All these are tiling textures except this one. I'm going to actually show you the process of creating this tiling texture from this. If you see here, this is 3K, 3 by 2K, so we're going to make it a square tiling texture in Photoshop. Then we've dark grey metal, so we'll use that as our metal. Then our fingerprints, this is just going to help to add more grime and stuff. You know, we could add this as a render pass, or we could just use this in Photoshop. And then this Caliban bump label, that's just I just made that really quickly in Photoshop to use that as a bump in Keyshot for that text that we didn't model in on the magazine and the gun. So that's all the textures we need. And then I just have this folder of I think they're from Viz Corbel. He's like an architectural sort of an artist who has loads of 3D Max and V-Ray tutorials, and when you buy his tutorials, he supplies all these textures, and I think one or two of them, maybe this one, and I think one or two of them are from maybe these ones from Grant Warwick's V-Ray Master V-Ray course, which I also attended. So these are just a collection of different materials. We can use these for bumps, reflections, masks in Photoshop. So it's just always handy to have a collection. So with all this in place, you know, we're kind of preparing ourselves for the work ahead. So you've all this out of the way. You don't have to, you're not stopping and starting while you're in the middle of the project going onto the internet or trying to search through folders looking for textures, and we've all this planned out, you know. So we're planning ahead here, which is quite important when you're in Keyshot. So you know, you don't just go into Keyshot and just start dragging materials around and hoping for the best. If we have all this planned out in advance, it's going to give us better results and a quicker turnaround, you know. So that's our materials, and then from that we know what textures we want, and then these are going to be the passes that we're going to need from Keyshot. Now none of this is set in stone, you know. Once you have all this in place and you start rendering passes, you can be working in Photoshop and then realize, oh, I need an extra pass for this or for that. You can just jump back to Keyshot, set up that pass, start rendering it, jump back to Photoshop and keep working in Photoshop until the render cleans up in Keyshot, and then just save it, copy and paste it in, and there you go, you know. So it's all non-destructive, all this. That's kind of the idea, you know. So our passes, you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4 are just going to be duplicated Photoshop layers with color variants. You know, we can use hue, saturation or whatever color balance to change them. Saves us having to render everything out twice. So over red metal, blue metal, grey metal, and our dirt. And our dirt is going to be, just be our the variant of the dirt is just going to be like a darker version of it. That's going to be grime. So the dirt will, you know, we could have dusty dirt that's going to appear maybe on top of the weapon where dust is settled on it, or at the bottom where maybe it was dropped on the ground or something in the dirt. And then the darker dirt layer, in Photoshop, we can just copy this dirt layer and darken it and use that as a grime layer and paint our mask away. So that's grime that's settled in corners and recesses and spots like that, you know. Then we've our AO ambient occlusion pass, our rim light pass, our clown pass, which is a material ID pass, so we can separate out our different objects based on the materials, and we'll have a mask with each of them automatically. So we'll talk about that when we get into Keyshot. Then we have our alpha map, which is just the entire alpha of the image. So we're going to be rendering against a black background. So you'll have that alpha channel, or you can render it as a TIFF and store the alpha channel automatically, and then just change our background. So that's all the prep work kind of talked about, and just a general sort of an idea of a tidy workflow and an organized workflow that's going to make your life easier. So I'll just close these down. So that is pretty much that, and now we are going to just take this. So I'm just going to pause the video and I'm just going to apply all the beveling, get rid of this noise and everything, and then we're going to send it across to Keyshot, which is just 2 or 3 clicks. Alright, back in a sec. Right, so I've done all the beveling, and I'm happy with it, and I'm ready to send this over to Keyshot. So before we do anything, it's just 2 settings, one on Zbrush, one on Keyshot, to make sure we're in place before the bridge is going to work. So we'll jump across to Keyshot, edit, preferences, and down to advanced, and you see this live link, and you want to just make sure that's enabled. And just one other thing while I'm in this menu, you see I have this checked here, use gloss instead of roughness for materials. So some renders, sure a lot of you are familiar, but some renders use the term gloss and some renders use the term roughness. So they're just the opposite of each other. It's just a different way of describing the same effect basically on the material. So I use V-Ray, so V-Ray uses gloss, but I think other renders, I think Keyshot actually defaults to roughness. So basically what it means is when your gloss is set to 1, your material is 100% reflective, like a mirror surface. When your gloss is at 0, it's completely diffuse or blurred reflection, and roughness is the very opposite. When roughness is at 1, you have the blurred reflection, and roughness at 0, you have the mirror reflection. So they're pretty much exactly the same thing, but just different terms and ways of thinking about it. So I just wanted to mention that while we're in that menu. So that's live linking is enabled. Back to Zbrush, render, external render, and all you have to do is click Keyshot. And now when I hit the BPR button, that's going to set up the live link between Zbrush and Keyshot. So I've a couple of series of videos actually on Keyshot, and it just shows you this, but you just press that button and you'll see here render in progress, send it to Keyshot. This is a progress bar. Take a few seconds, and depending on the resolution of your subtools, that determines how long it's going to take. So if I just tab across, you can see that I had Keyshot already open, so it didn't automatically jump across. But if I hadn't had it open and I pressed BPR, it would have automatically opened and then jumped across. So you can even see that it has those materials, the matte caps that were on them already, you know. So I'm not going to go into all this Keyshot stuff in depth. I'll just use the features that we need to use to do what we're doing. Because as I say, I have a two-part series that I think each of them's maybe 30 or 40 minutes long, that go into all the features that you're going to need to know. So I'll just go through what we need to go through. So at any time you can jump back over to Zbrush. We have a live link in place here now, so I could jump back to Zbrush and just solo out whatever tool here, press BPR, and it'll jump back across, and it's soloed that out, just in case you don't want to look through those other videos. Navigation, all important. Left mouse button to orbit, middle mouse button to pan, middle mouse wheel to zoom in or out, and alt and right to zoom also a bit more precisely than the wheel. So that's left button to orbit, middle to pan, middle wheel to zoom in or out, and alt right to zoom in and out a little more accurately. So I'll jump back to Zbrush, and you know, you can make changes here and jump across. So as you're rendering, it'll remember the settings and materials that were over in Keyshot, so you don't have to worry about setting that up again. It's like it's a live link. It's very, very well integrated. It's not just a kind of a tack-on gimmicky sort of a thing. So back to Keyshot. I just forgot to press the bridge again. So we're back in again, and now I'm going to finish this part here, and maybe I said it was going to be 2 parts, but we'll actually do it in 3 parts. This was just to establish the kind of bit of groundwork here in the setting up. So in this video, I also would like to talk about just this other. It's very important, and it's nearly the first thing you want to do when you jump across the Keyshot here, and that is come over to your camera tab here, and at the moment you have free camera and camera 1. So say if we select camera 1 and we rename that shot cam, we'll say, and you can have as many cameras as you like. So we'll rename that shot cam, and decide on, because this is a sort of a, whichever camera angle you decide to render at, you're going to have to keep it at that for all your passes, and then you're set in that angle. So you want to just make sure that you're happy with your angle, because once you start rendering passes, that's it, then you can't change the angle, and if you do, you have to re-render all the passes. So let's say for instance we're happy with that, and I'm going to change this to focal length of 80mm, and that just kind of flattens out the perspective a bit more. So this is personal taste here, whichever you like the look of, distorted lens or sort of flattened out sort of perspective, closer to an orthographic view. So let's say we're happy with that. We're on our shot cam here, and we want to just lock that cam, and now I'm trying to orbit in the view, I can't. So very important to do that, to set up that, to lock your camera out. You can always this little button doesn't work sometimes, so you have to just right click it. You can always come out of it and lock it again, toggle lock, right click. But as I say, once you're happy with your render angle, your camera angle, you want to just lock that off, and that's it then. Now, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I was going to talk about the different methods of rendering, but we'll talk about that in the next one, and we will leave it at that for this one. Alright, see you in the next one. Cheers, thanks, good luck.